"You're not fit to be principal," Henry Brooks's voice thunders, silencing the crowd at Crestwood Elementary's field day in Seattle. The air crackles as Felicia, his stunning black wife, stands firm, shielding their daughter Gia from prejudice that cuts deeper than words. A mother's love, a billionaire's resolve. Can they shatter the school's facade of privilege? Where are you watching from? Your city, your time zone. Drop it in the comments below. What do you think happens when truth collides with bias? Will justice prevail, or will the system prevail? Subscribe now to catch our latest stories of courage and change. And don't miss the twist that'll leave you speechless. Will Felicia and Gia rise above the scorn? Can one family redefine a school's soul? Hit that subscribe button, share your thoughts, and stay with us to find out. The late May sun blazed over Seattle's Crestwood Elementary, casting a golden glow across the sprawling field where the annual field day pulsed with life. Felicia Brooks stepped through the school's arched gate, her deep ebony skin shimmering like polished obsidian under the morning light. Her long black hair, cascading in silken waves, caught the breeze, framing a face so strikingly beautiful it seemed to challenge the world around her. She wore a simple Nike ensemble, a crisp white t-shirt, fitted black capri leggings, and scuffed Nike sneakers, their wear a testament to her practicality. Yet, unbeknownst to the crowd, her outfit was a limited edition design, worth thousands, Azai's quiet rebellion against the assumptions she knew would come. Today, she was here for her 8-year-old daughter, Gia, whose small hand clung tightly to hers. Felicia's smile radiated warmth, a beacon of pride, but beneath it lay a truth she hadn't yet glimpsed. Gia's silent dread. Gia, her light, brown skin a delicate blend of her mother's rich hue and her father's fairness, walked with a hesitant step. Her twin braids, meticulously woven by Felicia's careful hands that morning, bobbed with each movement, a shield of love against the day ahead. Her bright eyes, inherited from her father, Henry Brooks, flickered with unease, scanning the vibrant chaos of the field. Crestwood was no ordinary school. It was a bastion of prestige, its manicured lawns and gleaming facilities a magnet for Seattle's affluent. Felicia and Henry had fought to secure Gia's place here, drawn to its promise of rigorous academics and boundless opportunity. They believed it was a launch pad for their daughter's dreams. But Gia's heart carried a secret heavier than her. Green team bandana. This school, with its polished halls, was a battlefield where her peers' cruel whispers targeted her skin, her hair, her very existence. The field thrummed with energy. Red and blue banners snapped in the breeze, their colors vivid against the emerald turf. Children in bright jerseys darted between stations, their laughter mingling with the thump of pop music blaring from oversized speakers. The scent of grilled hot dogs and sunscreen hung thick in the air, a sensory tapestry of celebration. Parents clustered near concession stands, snapping photos with sleek phones, their voices a hum of privilege. Felicia adjusted Gia's bandana, her fingers lingering on the fabric, a tether to her daughter's courage. "You're going to shine today, baby," she said, her voice a warm anchor, her smile bright despite the faint ache in her chest. Gia nodded, but her gaze snagged on a group of girls nearby, their giggles sharp as shards of glass. "They're watching, Mom," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Felicia's heart skipped, but she brushed it off, mistaking Gia's fear for nerves. She hadn't yet seen the shadows lurking in her daughter's world. The taunts that followed Gia through Crestwood's halls, the lunch trays accidentally spilled, the backpacks hidden in lockers, the whispers of scholarship kid, and weird hair that cut deeper than bruises. Gia had begged Felicia not to come today, her pleas cloaked in vague excuses, but Felicia's enthusiasm had overridden her daughter's quiet protests. She saw this field day as a chance for Gia to belong, to run free under this bright sky, not to cower beneath its glare. She didn't know that Gia's reluctance was a shield against a truth too heavy for an 8-year-old to voice. Crestwood didn't want her. As they crossed the grass, Felicia's worn sneakers sank into the impossibly green turf, each step a quiet defiance against the sea of polished faces around her. Heads turned, their glances fleeting but barbed, as if her presence unraveled an unspoken code. A woman in a pristine white tracksuit, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, leaned toward her friend, her voice carrying, "She looks more like hired help than a mom." The words sliced through the warm air, sharp and deliberate. Felicia's cheeks burned, a sting she'd known in boardrooms and boutiques now piercing deeper in her daughter's world. She wasn't their caricature, poor, misplaced. She was an environmental consultant whose firm shaped policies that saved millions in resources. But her simple attire, her blackness, wove a false narrative that the crowd eagerly embraced. Gia's grip tightened, her small fingers trembling. Felicia knelt, her wavy hair falling softly, her eyes meeting her daughter's. "Focus on your race, baby," she said, her voice a forced calm. "You're stronger than their stares." But the weight of those stares pressed heavier. A rising tide of prejudice Felicia knew too well. She wasn't just a mother here. She was a challenge to their order, her blackness a mirror they refused to face. Gia deserved this school, its opportunities, its promise, and Felicia deserved to stand as her mother, unbowed, unafraid. At the gate, a security guard, Mr. Thompson, stepped forward, his face a mask of authority. "ID, please," he demanded, his tone clipped. Felicia blinked, the request a jolt. Other parents, pale, unquestioned, moved freely, their presence unchallenged. "I'm Gia's mother," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest, pulling her driver's license from her purse. Thompson examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, his lips pursed as if hunting for a flaw. "Fine," he muttered, waving her through as if her existence were an inconvenience. Gia tugged her hand, her braids brushing Felicia's arm. "Why'd he do that, Mom?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Felicia's jaw clenched. She wanted to shield Gia from this poison, to promise a world where her daughter's worth wasn't questioned. "Some folks need time to see us, baby," she said, her words a fragile shield. But as they moved toward the relay lineup, the crowd's eyes followed, their whispers a low drone of exclusion. Felicia stood taller, her resolve a steel thread woven through her spine. Whatever this field held, she would face it. For Gia. For the little girl whose sparkly self deserved to burn bright under this unforgiving sun. The field at Crestwood Elementary pulsed with the vibrant chaos of field day, a kaleidoscope of color and sound under Seattle's blazing May sun. Red and blue banners fluttered like restless spirits, their sharp snaps blending with the thump of pop music from oversized speakers. The air carried the smoky tang of grilled hot dogs, mingling with the laughter of children weaving through the crowd in bright jerseys. Felicia Brooks guided her 8-year-old daughter, Gia, toward the relay station, her long black hair swaying like a dark river, her deep ebony skin catching the light. Her Nike ensemble, white t-shirt, black capri leggings, worn sneakers, marked her as unassuming, yet the crowd's eyes followed her, their glances heavy with unspoken verdicts. Gia's twin braids bounced softly, her light brown skin glowing with a warmth that belied the fear in her wide eyes. Felicia felt the weight of the stairs but pressed forward, her hand a steady anchor on Gia's. The turf beneath their feet was impossibly green, a manicured stage for Crestwood's elite. Parents clustered near the bleachers, their sleek phones flashing as they captured their children's triumphs. Felicia's heart thrummed with pride for Gia, who clutched her green team bandana, poised for the relay race. But the air thickened with an undercurrent of exclusion, a silent chorus of judgment that seemed to coil around them. A woman in a pristine white tracksuit, Karen Mitchell, stood near the concession stand, her blonde ponytail a stark flag of privilege. She leaned toward her friend, her voice carrying like a blade through the warm air. "She looks more like hired help than a mom." The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate, igniting a familiar sting in Felicia's chest. She tightened her grip on Gia's hand, her jaw clenching to cage the fire rising within her. Felicia had faced such barbs before, in boardrooms where her expertise was questioned, in boutiques where clerks trailed her like a thief. But here, in her daughter's world, the scorn cut deeper, a wound threatening to bleed into Gia's fragile confidence. She glanced at her daughter, whose eyes darted across the crowd, searching for a kindness that felt elusive. "Ignore them, baby," Felicia whispered, her voice a forced calm, her smile strained against the ache in her heart. Gia nodded, but her small frame seemed to shrink, her braids a quiet testament to the love Felicia had woven into them that morning. The relay lineup buzzed with anticipation, children jostling for position, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension coiling around Felicia and Gia. As they reached the starting line, a group of girls nearby giggled, their voices jagged as broken glass. One of them, Chloe Mitchell, Karen's daughter, sauntered forward, her blonde hair bouncing in a high ponytail, her blue jersey pristine. She stopped inches from Gia, her eyes glinting with malice. Without warning, she reached out and yanked one of Gia's braids hard. "Weird hair," Chloe sneered, her voice loud enough to draw snickers from her friends. Gia flinched, her hand flying to her braid, her eyes welling with tears she fought to hide. The field seemed to tilt, the music fading to a distant hum as Felicia's pulse thundered in her ears. She stepped forward, pulling Gia behind her, her voice low but firm. "Don't touch my daughter." Chloe's smirk widened, unfazed, her entitlement a shield. The crowd's eyes turned, some curious, others hostile, as if Felicia's defense had breached an invisible line. Karen Mitchell appeared, her tracksuit gleaming, her arms crossed like a gatekeeper of this polished world. "Oh, come on," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's just kids playing. You're making a scene over nothing. You and your girl need to know your place." The words were a venomous dart, each syllable framing Felicia and Gia as outsiders, their blackness a mark of suspicion in Crestwood's pristine bubble. Felicia's cheeks burned, her breath catching as the injustice sank its claws deeper. Gia pressed closer, her small voice trembling. "Mom, I told you I didn't want you here." The confession was a knife to Felicia's heart, slicing through, her enthusiasm to reveal the truth Gia had hidden. This school, with its promises of opportunity, was a crucible of cruelty for her daughter. The taunts, the exclusion, the daily torment Gia endured. Felicia saw it all in her daughter's eyes, wide with a pain no 8-year-old should carry. Her chest tightened, not with anger but with a mother's anguish, the realization that her dream for Gia's future had led them into a lion's den. She wanted to scoop Gia up, to flee this field of hidden knives, but running would mean surrender. Gia deserved more, a world where her light wasn't dimmed by prejudice. Felicia straightened, her long hair framing a face carved with resolve. "This isn't play," she said, her voice rising, clear and unyielding, addressing Karen directly. "Your daughter hurt mine and you're defending it. That's not how this works." The crowd hushed, their stares a heavy curtain, some shifting uncomfortably, others nodding in silent agreement with Karen. Chloe giggled, emboldened by her mother's presence, her friends mimicking her with exaggerated flair. The air thickened, the music a faint pulse in the distance. Felicia's hand trembled on Gia's, but her gaze held steady, a challenge to the world that dared to judge them. She wasn't just a mother now. She was a warrior, standing for the little girl whose courage deserved a stage, not a cage. The air at Crestwood Elementary's field day hung heavy with the residue of Karen Mitchell's venomous words, her accusation that Felicia and Gia needed to know their place, echoing like a gunshot across the vibrant field. Felicia Brooks stood resolute, her ebony skin gleaming under Seattle's relentless May sun, her long black hair cascading in defiant waves. Her Nike outfit, white t-shirt, black capri leggings, scuffed sneakers, seemed to mock the crowd's assumptions, a quiet testament to her strength. Gia, her 8-year-old daughter, clung to her side, her twin braids trembling as her light brown cheeks flushed with shame. The crowd's eyes, a mix of curiosity and hostility, bore into them, their silence a tacit approval of Karen's cruelty. Felicia's heart thundered, her pulse a war drum against the injustice that threatened to swallow her daughter's spirit. She had just heard Gia's whispered confession. "Mom, I told you I didn't want you here." A revelation that unveiled the torment her daughter endured at Crestwood, the elite school meant to be her sanctuary. Karen, her white tracksuit, a beacon of smugness, stood with arms crossed, her blonde ponytail swaying as she doubled down. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her voice smooth but barbed, her eyes flicking to Felicia's worn sneakers as if they were evidence of inferiority. "Kids tease. Chloe didn't mean anything by it. Maybe your girl's too sensitive for a place like this." The words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, framing Gia's pain as weakness, her blackness as otherness. Chloe, her daughter, smirked from behind, her blue jersey pristine, her earlier taunt, weird hair, still ringing in Felicia's ears. The field's festive pulse, the snap of banners, the thump of pop music, the sizzle of concession stands, faded to a distant hum, the world shrinking to this moment of confrontation. Felicia's breath caught, her chest a cauldron of fury and anguish. She wanted to shield Gia from this poison, to erase the hurt etched in her daughter's wide, fearful eyes. "This isn't teasing," she said, her voice low but searing, cutting through the crowd's murmur. "Your daughter targeted mine because of her skin, her hair, and you're excusing it. That's not parenting, it's complicity." The crowd stilled, some parents shifting uncomfortably, others tightening their grips on their Starbucks cups, their privilege a shield they refused to lower. Karen's smirk faltered, but she leaned forward, her tone dripping with false sincerity. "Look, we're inclusive here, but some families don't quite fit our traditions. You'd understand if you were part of this community." The implication was a blade, slicing through Felicia's resolve to remain calm. She wasn't their caricature, an outsider, unworthy. Her environmental consulting firm had shaped policies that saved millions, her work a silent force behind sustainable futures. But here, her blackness, her unpolished presence was all they saw. Gia pressed closer, her small hand trembling, her braids brushing Felicia's arm. "Mom, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Can we just go?" The plea was a dagger, twisting in Felicia's heart. She saw the truth now. Gia's reluctance to have her at field day wasn't childish nerves, but a desperate attempt to protect her mother from the cruelty she faced daily. Felicia's promise, "They'll love you, baby, be your sparkly self," felt like a betrayal, too bold for a world that refused to see Gia's worth. Felicia's resolve hardened, a steel thread woven through her spine. She couldn't leave, not yet. Gia deserved a mother who fought, who stood unbowed against this tide of prejudice. "We're not going anywhere," she said, her voice rising, clear and unyielding. "My daughter belongs here, same as yours. If you can't see that, the problem's yours, not ours." The crowd's silence deepened, a few parents exchanging glances, their discomfort a crack in their polished veneer. Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips parting to retort, but Felicia turned away, her focus on Gia. She knelt, her long hair falling, softly, her eyes locking onto her daughter's. "You're enough, baby," she whispered, her voice a lifeline. "We're enough." Determined to seek justice, Felicia demanded to see the principal. The crowd parted as she led Gia across the field, their steps heavy on the pristine turf. In the principal's office, Diane Larson sat behind a polished desk, her tailored blazer a symbol of authority, her gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes, cold and unyielding, raked over Felicia's outfit, her gaze lingering on the scuffed sneakers. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, her voice clipped, "we don't tolerate disruptions at field day. Chloe's actions were just childish play, and Karen is a valued PTA member. You need to control your emotions." Felicia's breath hitched, the dismissal a slap. "My daughter was bullied because of her skin," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "You call that play? You're protecting the wrong people." Diane's lips curled into a thin smile, her tone dripping with condescension. "Crestwood has standards, Mrs. Brooks. Perhaps you and your daughter don't align with our culture. The words were a guillotine, their bureaucratic righteousness cutting deep. Felicia's pulse raced, her mind screaming to protect Gia, to tear through this facade of privilege. Culture, she repeated, her voice ablade. You mean a culture that lets my daughter be hurt, that judges us before knowing us? That's not a standard, it's a failure. Diane's smile tightened, her authority challenged, but she leaned back, unmoved. Take it up with the school board if you're happy. For now, return to the event or leave. Felicia stood, her frame unbowed, her long hair framing a face carved with defiance. The injustice was a fire in her veins, but Gia's trembling hand grounded her. This wasn't just about a taunt or a pulled braid. It was about Gia's right to exist here, to be seen beyond her skin. The office walls seemed to close in, the hum of field day a distant echo. Felicia's fingers curled into fists, her resolve a flame that refused to flicker. She reached for her phone, her voice steady despite the storm within. Henry, she said, her call a beacon in the gathering dark. Come to the school. Now. Gia needs you. The line clicked, and Felicia knew the tide was about to turn. The office of Crestwood Elementary's principal, Diane Larson, felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with the aftermath of her dismissive verdict. Felicia Brooks stood tall, her ebony skin aglow under the fluorescent lights, her long black hair a cascade of defiance framing her resolute face. Her Nike outfit, white t-shirt, black capri leggings, scuffed sneakers, stood in stark contrast to the polished sterility of the room. Beside her, Gia, her 8-year-old daughter, clung to her hand, her twin braids trembling, her light brown cheeks flushed with the weight of the confrontation. Diane's words, "Perhaps you and your daughter don't align with our culture," hung like a storm cloud, their bureaucratic venom a final blow after Karen Mitchell's cruel taunts and Chloe's bullying. Felicia's pulse thundered, her call to her husband Henry, a lifeline cast into the gathering dark. Outside, the field day's festive hum, pop music, snapping banners, sizzling hot dogs, felt worlds away, a mockery of the battle unfolding. Within these walls, Felicia's eyes, sharp with a mother's fury, held Diane's gaze, refusing to bend. "You failed my daughter," she said, her voice a low, searing blade. "You let her be targeted for her skin and call it culture. That's not leadership. It's cowardice." Diane's lips parted, her gray bun tightening as her face flushed, but before she could retort, a low, sleek hum sliced through the tension. Beyond the office window, a Tesla Model S glided into the school's parking lot, its obsidian surface flashing like a beacon in the fading Seattle sunlight. Heads turned outside, the crowd's chatter faltering as parents and children paused. Drawn to the vehicle's understated power, Felicia's heart steadied, a spark of hope igniting. Henry was here. The office door swung open and Henry Brooks stepped in, his presence a thunderclap in the charged silence. At 36, his fair skin and sharp green eyes contrasted with Gia's warm tones. But his love for his family burned fiercely, a force needing no flourish. His tailored gray suit hung perfectly, his stride purposeful. A man who'd reshaped industries, now drawn to a fight he hadn't foreseen. He'd left a board meeting at Ecosphere, his green tech empire, driven by Felicia's urgent call. Gia's face lit up, her braids bouncing as she broke free. "Dad," she cried, hurtling into his arms. Henry knelt, scooping her into a hug, his smile a fleeting oasis before his eyes found Felicia's. Her expression, defiant yet strained, told him everything. The scorn, the bullying, the principal's betrayal. Henry set Gia down, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder as he crossed to Felicia, his touch on her back a silent vow of shared battles. "What's going on, love?" he asked, his voice soft but laced with steel, a warning the room couldn't miss. Felicia's gaze held his, her resolve unshaken. "They don't think we belong," she said, each word a quiet indictment. "Gia's been bullied, and they're blaming us for speaking up." Henry's jaw tightened, his green eyes sweeping the room, taking in Diane's rigid posture, her blazer a flimsy shield against his authority. The crowd outside, visible through the window, pressed closer, their whispers a restless hum as they sensed a shift in the air. "I'm Henry Brooks, Gia's father," he said, his tone even but unyielding, addressing Diane directly. "Why is my wife being treated like an intruder? Why is my daughter a target for her skin?" Diane blinked, her composure cracking, her hands clutching her desk as if to anchor her faltering control. "Mr. Brooks," she began, her voice smoother now, "this is a misunderstanding. We're ensuring the field day runs smoothly. Your wife's concerns are noted." Henry's eyes narrowed, cutting through her veneer like a blade. "Noted?" he repeated, his voice rising just enough to carry. "You mean her standing up for our daughter against bullying? You mean your culture that singles out my wife while others go unquestioned?" The room stilled, the weight of his words a challenge that shrank Diane's authority to a hollow shell. Outside, parents exchanged glances, some avoiding his gaze, their complicity exposed. Karen Mitchell, lingering near the office door with her pristine tracksuit, stepped forward, her tone syrupy. "It's about community, Mr. Brooks," she said, her smile brittle. "We're protective of our traditions." Henry's gaze locked on hers, unflinching. "Community?" he said, his voice a scalpel. "You've targeted my wife for being black, let our daughter be mocked. What kind of community is that?" His words hung heavy, silencing the murmurs beyond the door. Gia pressed closer to Felicia, her small frame steadied by her parents' unity. Henry turned back to Diane, his presence a quiet storm. "You've failed to protect my daughter," he said, his voice steady but searing. "You've dismissed my wife's rightful anger as a disruption. You're not fit to be principal." Diane's face drained of color, her lips parting but no words coming. The crowd outside fell silent, the music a distant pulse. Felicia felt a surge of pride, not for Henry's status, but for his heart, the man who saw her worth when others refused. She squeezed Gia's hand, her voice soft but firm. "We're here for our daughter like any of you," she said, addressing the parents now crowding the doorway. "Why is that a threat?" The question lingered, a mirror to their prejudice. Henry stood beside her, his arm around Gia, his love a quiet fire. The office seemed to hold its breath, Diane's authority crumbling like dry clay. The parents' silence was a verdict they could no longer ignore. Felicia and Henry stood as a united front, their daughter between them, ready to face whatever came next. The field day's festive veneer had cracked, and the truth was a flame that would not be extinguished. The field at Crestwood Elementary stood frozen, the air taut as a bowstring in the wake of Henry Brooks's searing proclamation. Diane Larson was unfit to lead. The Seattle sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of fire, but its warmth couldn't pierce the chill of the crowd's shifting eyes. Felicia Brooks stood beside her husband, her ebony skin glowing with unyielding resolve, her long black hair a cascade of defiance. Her Nike outfit, white t-shirt, black capri leggings, scuffed sneakers, seemed to mock the crowd's earlier scorn. Gia, their 8-year-old daughter, clung to Felicia's hand, her twin braids steady now, her light brown cheeks flushed with a fragile hope. The parents, once a wall of judgment, wavered, their whispers silenced by Henry's challenge, and Felicia's unwavering stand. The field day's festive pulse, pop music, snapping banners, sizzling hot dogs, faded to a distant hum, the world shrinking to this reckoning. Henry's gaze, sharp and green, pinned Diane, whose tailored blazer now seemed flimsy prop. "Crestwood is meant to nurture futures," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "Not harbor prejudice, this ends now." He turned to the crowd, his arm around Gia. "Field day is canceled. We're implementing mandatory training for every teacher on diversity, on accountability. No child, no family will be targeted here again." The words landed like a gavel, final and unyielding. Diane's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she clutched her desk. Karen Mitchell, her white tracksuit no longer a badge of superiority, stood frozen, her daughter Chloe hiding behind her, eyes downcast. The crowd stirred, some parents nodding, others retreating in silence, their privilege laid bare. Felicia stepped forward, her voice clear, resonant. "We didn't come to disrupt," she said, her eyes sweeping the field. "We came for our daughter like you. If that's a threat, your values need fixing." Gia squeezed her hand, her small frame steadied by her mother's strength. A murmur rippled through the parents, a few offering tentative apologies, their faces flushed with shame. A mother in a Lululemon jacket who'd once whispered against Felicia raised a hesitant voice. "I didn't see it," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, we can do better." Her words were a spark, igniting nods from others, a ripple of accountability spreading through the crowd. Henry's presence, a pillar of quiet power, amplified Felicia's truth. "This school exists because of my family's vision," he said, his tone firm. "Not to exclude, but to uplift. Prove you're part of that, or step aside." His words were a challenge, not just to Diane, but to every parent who'd stood complicit. A man in a polo, his bravado gone, muttered, "We'll support whatever it takes." His offer was less about generosity than survival, a recognition that Crestwood's shine rested on the Brooks family's legacy. Felicia's chest tightened, not with triumph, but with the weary knowledge that change required more than words. "This isn't about promises," she said, her voice a quiet rebuke. "It's about Gia, about every child who's been made to feel less." The field exhaled, the tension splintering like glass. Diane, her authority in tatters, stammered, "We'll convene a task force, anti-bullying training, diversity programs." Her words were hollow, a bureaucratic retreat, but they carried weight she couldn't retract. Felicia's gaze held steady, unflinching. "Not just programs," she said, her voice rising. "A culture that sees my daughter's worth, not her skin. We'll hold you to it." Gia shifted closer, her braids brushing Felicia's arm, her eyes bright with a trust that anchored her mother's resolve. The crowd watched, some still resistant, others awakened, as the sun sank, casting long shadows across the turf. Weeks later, Crestwood began to transform. Diane Larson's resignation was announced quietly, replaced by a principal committed to equity. Teachers underwent rigorous training, their classrooms now spaces where diversity was taught, not tolerated. Karen Mitchell was removed from the PTA, and Chloe, enrolled in a program on empathy, approached Gia one afternoon. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice small but genuine. Gia, her braids bouncing as she ran home, hugged Felicia tightly. "School's better now, Mom," she said, her smile of victory Felicia clung to. The Seattle Times published an exposé on Crestwood's past exclusions, sparking citywide calls for reform, with the Brooks family's story, unnamed at their quest, at its heart. That evening, Felicia stood in their backyard, the Puget Sound glimmering under a twilight sky. Henry played with Gia, her laughter a melody as she chased him, her green t-shirt a nod to her relay race days. Felicia's long hair caught the breeze, her heart full. "We showed her she's enough," she said softly, slipping her hand into Henry's. He squeezed it, his green eyes warm. "You show her every day," he said, his voice a steady vow. Gia ran to them, her braids flying, her smile unburdened. Crestwood's newsletter, tucked among routine updates, carried a new pledge. "All families welcome." It was a whisper of change, born from Felicia's truth, a light that no prejudice could dim. Felicia, Gia, and Henry's fight for justice at Crestwood has left a spark that lights the way for change. What did their story stir in you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand tall against prejudice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. We're so grateful you joined us on this journey, shining a light on courage and truth. Don't miss more stories that inspire. Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest videos. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what moved you most. Let's keep this conversation alive. Until next time, keep standing, keep shining, and we'll see you soon.